On the subject of birdsong, leads us rather nicely into I Swear, which is a biopic of John Davidson, the Tourette syndrome campaigner. So it's written and directed by Kirk Jones. Kirk Jones came out of advertising, had a huge hit at the end of the 80s with Waking Ned, which incidentally was shot in the Isle of Man, in Craignish in the Isle of Man, very famously. Went on to direct Nanny McPhee, which I loved, some rom-com-y things, one of the Greek weddings. This is in a whole other league. So this is based on the true story of John Davidson, brilliantly played by Robert, I think, Mayo. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. So we meet him at the beginning of the film preparing to receive an MBE. I think he's at Hollywood Palace. And he's terrified of going into the room because he knows that he might say or do something inappropriate because he has Tourette's. He was the subject of a 1989 documentary, John's Not Mad, and then a couple of subsequent documentaries. So he became quite well and then became a campaigner. So the film then goes back to his childhood. Young Galashiels boy with a potentially promising career, football as a goalie, his dad's very proud of him. Then he starts developing these twitches, these tics. He starts spitting. He starts to say things inappropriately, often obscenities, causes ructions at school, causes ructions at home. His dad walks out, leaves him at home with his mum, played in brilliantly long-suffering fashion by Shirley Henderson. So fast forward several years, now an adult, still living with his mum, who is befriended by Dottie, played by Maxine Peake, who takes him into her house, under her wing, and sort of offers him a new horizon. Here's a clip.
Oh, off you. Sorry, everyone.
Right, John. If you're going to visit us more often, which, I hope you are, I need to speak to you about your language.
Aye, okay.
We have one rule in this house. And that's if you do anything you can't help, you never, ever have to apologise for it.
The brilliant Maxine Peake. So also Peter Molland as the caretaker of local community centre who's looking for someone to follow in his footsteps and perhaps offers employment to John, who needs something to lead him through things. So the film played in Toronto, and it's been getting rave reviews ever since, with particular plaudits for the performances. Simon Brew, who I'm a big fan of in film stories, said this was on the poster, it's on the trailer. He described this as a film that might just change someone's life, and I think he's absolutely right. John Davidson won an MBE for, quote, his efforts to increase understanding of the condition and helping families deal with it across the country. And as I said, he's become an ambassador for the understanding of Tourette's. And this film, on which he is an exec, is part of that process. When that first doc came out, John's Not Mad, he was a teenager. And apparently, although it's a very good documentary, it put him in the spotlight in a way that some people reacted to it with ridicule and laughter.
Oh, it was huge, that doc, by the way, Mark. That doc was huge. I remember
massive.
it.
I
had no
really
idea
big.
until you said that in the beginning of this review that it was linked, that it was the same guy from the movie. That documentary, and your ridicule is right, because that was the year that I started, that September I started secondary school, and that doc came out. And it was a bit like seeing someone do an incredible football trick or something like that. Everyone in the playground was quoting him because we thought it was hilarious. Didn't know anything about Tourette's.
Precisely so. Now, so the interesting thing with this drama is that there is a lot of laughter in this film, but it's never laughing at somebody. It's to do with laughing with a situation. The condition, which I think is brilliantly portrayed on screen, it's a terrible burden. I mean, we see the suffering it causes. We see the isolation it causes. I mean, at one point, actually, it gets him hospitalized because he does something inappropriate in a bar, and the next thing, he's in hospital. But we also see behind the Tourette syndrome, we see this incredibly decent man who finally manages to find a non-judgmental environment and then passes on that act of kindness himself, because his life is transformed by people seeing beyond this kind of, the outer embodiment of the Tourette. I did an interview with Maxine Peake on stage earlier this week at the BFI, and this really weird thing happened. I started asking her a question about the film. I was trying to say the thing about Simon Brew had said, it's a film that could change somebody's life. Because from my point of view, I mean, I didn't know anything about Tourette's really at all. And watching the film, I felt that my understanding of it was really increased. But also, it's a film about empathy. It's a film about understanding. All the great films are about empathy, about understanding somebody's situation. I started asking Maxine Peake this question. And I suddenly, in the middle of the question, I found myself crying. It was the weirdest thing. I felt really kind of like a mix of confused and embarrassed, but I sort of struggled through the question. I said, I'm sorry, can you just pick this up? Because I've kind of lost it a little bit.
Wow.
And then Maxine Peake started, this is a real thing that happened. And then Maxine Peake started answering the question, and she was going, oh, what are you like? And blah, 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 blah. And then about 5 minutes later on, she was answering a question about it, and she started doing the same thing.
Oh, wow.
And I think the reason is because the film, or even just a memory of the film, is so gets you in the feels so much because it's so humanistic. It's in the real sense of that. It is a drama with real three-dimensional people facing real three-dimensional problems and dealing with them in a way that is compassionate and empathetic, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I mean, bits of it are heartbreaking, bits of it are really painful to watch, and you really do get a sense of just how isolating this whole, situation is. But you also get a sense of somebody overcoming tremendous odds to become the best version of themselves. And it's moving, it's funny, it's profound. And I do think Simon Brew is right. I think it might change somebody's life. It certainly changed the way that anyone who sees it will come out with a greater understanding of Tourette's, but they will also come out with a kind of sense, and I think this is really important nowadays in the world, that people can be really good. People can be really decent and really admirable in very, very difficult cases. I loved it. I thought it was fabulous. I really loved it.